Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Louise Dawson, and I'll be working with Wendy Harris, who is from... Actually, Wendy, do you want to introduce yourself? Then you'll pop up on the screen, everyone will see who you are.
Yes, hello, my name's Wendy Harris. I work at GEMS Wellington International School. I'm the assistant head teacher for inclusion there, and I have been there for, this is my 10th year, so a fair while.
Very good. Stacey?
And I am Stacey Bradwell. I am the Assistant Principal for Inclusion at Wellington Primary School. I have been there 2 years now, but previously worked for Wellington Silicon Oasis. So I've been in the GEMS network for a little bit longer. Yeah,
you also spent time setting up Switzerland.
I did. I went to Switzerland for 2 years, a little bit, well, 18 months, a little bit of a secondment over there, and then came back.
Once you were successful, you came back.
I did.
Next challenge.
I was fed up with the snow and the cold.
Okay, so for Forum Decorum, if we could ask you to mute all your mics just to ensure that the speakers can be heard when they're talking. If you have a question, if you can write it in the conversation chat box over on the right-hand side. We're going to monitor the chat throughout the presentation, and then we'll highlight questions and we will invite you to speak at the end. If you could listen to the presentation first and then add a comment. If we could keep focused on students, we don't discuss individual children, otherwise we're going to be here for a very long time, and we've all got lives, even if they are within our homes. And we're not going to discuss individual cases, rather the overarching challenges of supports at school. So we've introduced Stacey, Wendy and myself, Louise Dawson from Jumeirah College, and I'd like to thank Emily Ellington for allowing us this forum and putting us all in touch with each other. It's amazing. Throughout the presentation, Stacey, Wendy and myself, we are Debye based, and a lot of our practice stems from the KHGA, and a lot of what we talk about today is KHGA Debye inclusion framework. We know that within Sharjah and Abu Dhabi, and if you're joining us from Qatar or any other schools, we know that it isn't necessarily applicable to you in terms of what we have to do to be compliant. However, what the KHGA are asking us to do is considered good practice across the world. It aligns very much with the UK system of special needs. It also aligns very closely with the DSM in America, and they have done loads of research through Australia and other countries as well. We also recognise that we've got the English curriculum, we've got American curriculum people here, we've got Indian curriculum people here, and we are very respectful of that as well. And some of what we say may not be applicable. We sit here in front of you as people who have done the job, and we work in exactly the same role as you. Your challenges are exactly the same as our challenges. None of us are sitting here professing to be the perfect expert, because none of us are. All of our practice, I worked with Wendy 8 years ago, and I would say that her practice has evolved, my practice has evolved, we evolve every single day. So what we say today might be actually very different to what we do tomorrow. And Wendy's talking about a project that she's going to be delivering at her school to trial for secondary IEPs. So it's flexible, it changes. We recognise we're not the experts, and we recognise that across all of the GEMS network, we have very different situations. Okay, that's the caveat. We're going to talk today about what an IEP is, why they are needed and how they inform lesson planning. Are they different whilst we're in distance learning? What are the KHGA requirements? And again, whilst it's Debye and KHGA, that is considered good practice across all schools and all curriculums. Who is involved when we create an IEP? What is a SMART target? And then Stacey's going to pop in and talk to us about early years and primary and examples that she uses of good practice. And then Wendy's going to pop in and talk about best practice in secondary. And then on the end, right on the end, I've tacked on a couple of slides about useful documents and books that you might want to download for helping you create your IEPs. Right. For those of you who are not in Debye, these documents have been released over the last 3 years, and they very much inform our practice and what we're going to be talking about today. I'm not going to go into them in depth, except for the directives, because the directives actually tell us what the government want from an IEP. So there will be a little bit more in depth going through. If you haven't downloaded these documents, please do. They're all on the KHDA website. If you don't have access to it and you can't find them because it's not the friendliest of websites, do drop us a note on Teams and we'll make sure that they're uploaded. If they're not already, they might even be in the documents part of Teams now. And if they're not, we'll get them put in there. Useful reading, even if they don't necessarily apply to your emirate. So within the first one, the IEPF, that was the first one that came out in 2017. There were laws and other documents prior to this, but this was where we really started to kick off inclusion across the emirates. It's got quite a bit in there about identification and early intervention. So the early intervention part does actually lead into your IEPs. The participation, leadership, all of these have mention of how we track our children, monitor, evaluate, and what we need to put into place for our children. The second document that came out in 2019 was the Implementing Inclusive Education. And again, it has different sections, and there are sections of this document that do give support and help in how to create your IEPs and moving forward. The third document that came out this year, 2020, beginning of this year, was the Directives and Guidelines for Inclusive Education. And I'm going to refer to quite a bit of this through my part of the presentation because it is very, very explicit about what the IEP is and what they are looking for and how we need to comply. Again, you might not need to comply, but it is considered good practice. The fourth document I'm going to share is the Debye Revised Categorisation Framework. So within this, it has the SEND definition. And I think when we're looking at who these IEPs have to be delivered to, that SEND definition, which is down the bottom, the second part of this page, is very, very clear about what is considered or who is considered to fall into the SEND definition. And those are the children that need the IEPs. There are rare occasions where we would do an IEP for a non-SEND child, where they're on the beginning of the pathway, when we're just beginning to identify the children. We might want to put one in just to document intervention and give evidence and proof of why that child is moving towards that SEND definition. This document has purpose and use. It talks about 4 common barriers. It breaks it down into cognition and learning, and then communication and interaction, social, emotional and mental health, and physical, sensory and medical. And within those 4 common barriers, there are 12 categories. And when we're talking about the documentation that we're using, what we all need to be doing is aligning our vocabulary and our identifications and our categories and our barriers to this document. And a lot of this document actually tells us what support we can put into place to support that barrier. So it's moving away a little bit, not completely. It's moving away from the medical model into this child is presenting with a literacy barrier. And within that literacy barrier, they need to be working on expressing ideas and feelings. And it really helps you to categorise what should be the focus of an IEP. It also informs possible interventions, and if we use this document, we have that consistency across all of our children and all of our practice across the Emirates. Within the directives, and I know that the UK Code of Practice and the DSM in America, they talk about a graduated system of support, and I think that this can cause quite a bit of confusion across the profession. In the UK, we call these waves, wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. Within my school, I'm still using waves because it's a system that my parents understand. It's a system that my teachers understand. And I try to align within our curriculum because the teachers will one day probably go back to their school system and their education system. So I comply with KHDA in terms of the wording on my documentation, but I might put in brackets wave 3 or wave 1, just so that my teachers can be aligned with our home documentation as well and terminology. We need to try and keep in touch. So if you are an Indian curriculum school and your system has different wording, I would suggest that you put both wordings on your documentation. Support your teachers to re-enter their workforce, but also support the government and the alignment, especially when our children move. So if I had a child that went, it would be the other way around. If a child went from Wellington Primary School into our secondary school, the parents are already familiar with that terminology. And again, that consistency is into place. So level 1 child is a child if I put an actual child against this, this would be a cognitively able child with dyslexia who needs quality first teaching. That's a phrase that means the teachers are able to support that child without any additional learning support. So they would be in class, they might have slightly differentiated tasks, they might have slightly differentiated outcomes, but generally they cope within school. We are very, very light touch. And a majority of our children should really fall into this group of level 1 children. Quality first teaching, differentiation, and no IEP is required for those children. You might still have a target, and if you want to do an IEP, if you're thinking they might move up to level 2, or they're just coming off level 2, but you still feel like they need to have a target, the parents might feel they need a target, the tutor or the head of year. If you want to put one in, there is no law that says you can't, but there isn't a necessity if you don't want to. If they are coping and they are fine, leave them alone. And really, you don't want that much paperwork. Within level 2, we're talking about targeted intervention children who are maybe climbing up the ladder to level 3 or climbing down the ladder from level 3. The children can be fluid between these levels. So when a child first enters school, we might let the teacher deal with it, let the teacher do the intervention, let them do the differentiation to see if it works. We might then move them onto a targeted, time-limited program, and they may need an IEP for that program. They would sit in level 2. If those targeted interventions don't work, we would then move the children up to level 3. They would become individualized program. They might have a specialist working with them. They would definitely have an IEP, and we'd be working at them in a very targeted and high needs case. If that works, we might then move them down to level 2 and level 1, but generally that's where the IEPs come in. So IEPs definitely for level 3, possibly for level 2, not necessary for level 1, but you can if you want to. There's no laws that say you can or you can't. It depends very much on your child, your context, your parents, your teachers. There's a lot of decision making that you need to put into place for your individual school. Okay, the graduated system of support is talked about in the directives, and it's on page 30, and on the bottom right of the screen I've tried to put in a reference point for you so that you can see where I've got this information from and read more in depth about that, because we're in a very short time frame. Okay, so what is an IEP? Within the directives on page 21 it says, for students who experience the most significant barriers to learning, an individual education plan is a key component of this process. The purpose of an IEP is to plan individualised provision in order to reduce the barriers to learning experience by students of determination as a result of their difficulty, condition or disorder. That's the official phrase for what is an IEP. It is a document, it is paper or it can be digital. It is collaborative. You don't do this on your own. I'll talk about the team around the child later. It is live, meaning it doesn't get written and put into a file and revisited after 6 weeks. We've all seen that practice. In fact, we've probably all done that practice, but we have moved with the times. It needs annotation, so either on a daily or a weekly, depending on that intervention. It needs to be annotated. KHDA love them if they are written all over. They don't need to be typed up and to be made looking pretty. In fact, the scruffier they are, sometimes the better, because it shows that it's live and it shows that people are looking at it. If you can have more than one person annotate it, that is a good thing. Don't worry about scruffy. It is a tracker. It's designed to track progress. What do we see is the main barrier? How are we going to start removing that? Where do they start and where do they finish at the end of the intervention? Targets can lie inside the curriculum or outside of the curriculum. So it can be an academic target, but it can also be a tying shoelaces target or a intimate care, going to the bathroom on our own target. So it can lie inside or outside. It focuses on that individual child. So if you've got 20 IEPs and they all look the same, then you're not focusing on that child's individual barrier. If it's a general academic target that the whole class is working on, then that's not an IEP, that's a classroom target, not an individual target. It can inform lesson planning. So if, for example, a child was working with an occupational therapist based on their fine motor skills because they are unable to pencil grip or hold a pencil correctly, then within the lesson, if you were doing a science lesson, you might want to incorporate a task into the science lesson, which improves the strength and the pincer grip within the hands. So it can inform wider lesson planning with your teachers. It's designed to be flexible and can be modified. I remember putting in a target for a kid at the beginning of the 6-week period, at the beginning of the half term. The child mastered that within the week. So with intensive, it was one of those things that they just got. There were other targets where the kid took 6 months. We don't do anything for 6 months. I'll come back to that. But if they are able to succeed, let's give them the star, let's give them the congratulations, and let's move on to the next target. You don't have to wait 6 weeks until you give them the next target. Small steps are much better than big ones. So we don't want targets that say something like the child is going to write a 3-page essay. And at the moment, the baseline is they can't pick up a pen. So we're going to focus on the child is going to make zeros in a line, all the same height and width. That's going to be our first target, and we're going to be successful, positively praise, and then move on to the next step of that process. So small steps, success and praise leads into the bigger progress across the children. In the directives on page 28, it talks about the recycle review. The image I managed to get off the internet hasn't come out very clearly. But basically, the 4 big parts are you assess the child and you work out what the barrier is that you're going to, which is the priority for today. You're going to plan for how you're going to support that priority. Then you're going to do the work and do the intervention. Then you're going to assess and review how they've got on with that intervention and with that barrier. Hopefully that barrier is removed. You then go back into the assessment to work out your next barrier, and you just keep working around in a cycle. Personally, if a child hasn't achieved something within 6 weeks, personally, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I would take that target off the table. I would put it to one side and say, look, we've seen some progress in some small steps along the way, but actually we've got to where we are and it's not happening. I have a 22-year-old son that still can't write his name. I have a 22-year-old son that can't tie shoelaces and still can't tie a tie. He has a degree in artificial intelligence, but the years we spent on capital letters and full stops was wasted time because we could have been supporting other barriers that he was probably going to achieve. He was never going to achieve that, and we hit him on the head in year 4, we hit him on the head in year 5. Every single essay in secondary school came back marked with, this is a really good essay, but you need to capitalise your beginning of your sentences. And I just kept, as a parent, I just kept on saying, he's not going to do it, leave him alone. And it's really funny because once he left university and went into the workplace, he does it just fine. He knows he's got to perform at a certain level. He's cognitively more able because he's older. He's in an environment where he's not thinking so much about the content because he loves the content. So the focus is no longer on learning. The focus can now be on the literacy, and it's in place and it's fine. So yes, we did our job. I just question my early practice about hitting him over the head for the first 20 years of his life with capital letters. So you can come back to it at the end of the year, you can come back to it next year. But if it's not working in 6 weeks, leave it, come back. So celebrate the success that was made and then come back to it later. Assess, plan, do, review. Within the directives on page 24, they talk about things to consider in an IEP. And just see if I can hold that up for you. 24. It looks like this in the actual directives. It's 2 pages and it's broken down into different sections, and this is main part of what we talk about for the IEPs in this session. So on the IEP you should have the student information, and you need to be identifying the category of need, which comes back to the categorisation document. The second box says main barriers to learning, and the third box says additional barriers to learning. So the main barrier to learning is the overarching, the biggest concern for that child, and then you might have additional barriers underneath. So you might, I can't think of an example, it's gone out of my head. So do read this because it very, very clearly states, I wouldn't read it on my screen because it's very, very blurred, but do download the document and read this because it's very clear about what is required at the beginning of your IEP. So why do we need them and how are they used in lesson planning? In the second section on page 24, it talks about the student learning profile. So we need them and we identify from this the performance level is the first box, areas of strength, second box, areas of difficulty, areas of interest and learning style. I'm very, very happy that we've moved away from the medical model and we're moving further towards the social model. We're not quite there, but we talk about areas of difficulty or challenge. We don't talk about problems. So we're taking away that negativity just to be a little bit kinder really for the children and the documentation with the parents. So we talk about strength, we talk about difficulties or challenges, and those need to be identified on the IEP. What we're trying to do is make our IEPs friendly about the child holistically. It's really, really important to recognise that just because they can't put capital letters and full stops, actually you can program a game on the internet without blinking at the age of 5. And it's really important to celebrate that they do have, every single person on this planet has strengths and challenges. Even me, apparently. So really important that we have all of these. Areas of interest is important. I find that if I write on there that my students have an interest in basketball or in motor racing or go-karting or something, when the children are struggling, this enables your teachers to just take a step back and go, oh, did you go motor racing on the weekend? And it enables relationships to build. It enables the strengthening of their excitement and engagement with the school and with the teaching staff. So areas of interest is always a very, very good one to have. And then learning style. Are the children more prone to listening to teachers go on and on and on, or are they better with images, or are they better with videos, or do they need to have that hands-on kinesthetic work? Which type of style? And I don't believe that all children are just one style. They might be kinesthetic for maths, but they might be video for literacy. So their learning style in which environment is very important to identify on the IEP. Classroom accommodations, how do we help? Things to avoid and access arrangements. So on the IEP, you can write things like the child needs to sit at the front of the class. I have one child that is visually impaired in left eye, so they need to sit on the correct side of the classroom, otherwise they can't see. Wheelchair access, do they have a table which goes up and down? Do they need all the classrooms to be on the ground floor because there's no lift and no access upstairs? Do they need access to a disabled toilet? What do they need in terms of, so access arrangements here is not just your 25% and your reader and your scribe. This is access to your classroom and accommodations, things to avoid and how to help. All of these things can be listed. How do they inform planning? I started this list and actually I probably could have gone on for about 5 or 6 different slides, but I decided to stop at 11 because 12 wouldn't fit on without making my font smaller. So within the environment, if you are in secondary and you are doing practical lessons and you have a child in a wheelchair, you need to seriously consider how, when we're doing, so for example, mixing of chemicals, it would be advisable to give them the chemicals in a jar with a pouring spout or with a lid so that if they were to spill the chemicals, they won't pour off the table onto the lap of the student, or that the table has a ridge, or that the work is done within a tray. There are many, many different circumstances in a school where practical lessons might need a little bit of support. Seating arrangements, if that's your planning. Playing to the student's strengths, if the children prefer to use, I can't remember the maths ones with the circles cut out. Can't remember, I can't hear you, on mute. Stacey's on mute. Numicon, that's the one. If the children like the physical kinesthetic and use Numicon, use that within your lessons. That's your planning. Support the challenges, make activities meaningful, contextualize across situations. So if you're doing money, don't just do worksheets, ask the teachers to be using real money. I know within the English curriculum, we have to teach pounds and pence, but actually if we teach it in dirhams and fils and then contextualize it into pounds and pence, sometimes that makes more sense to children because they understand dirhams and fils, not pounds and pence. So contextualize, Differentiation of outcomes. So if you want your group of children to demonstrate knowledge of Henry VIII, then some children might want to do a video, some children might want to write that, some people might want to type that, some children might want to demonstrate using a cartoon. So the content and the knowledge can be the same, but the outcomes can be different. It will aid in participation, because if you plan for your children, they can participate, and the participation is what keeps the children engaged in learning. It aids independence. If we give them what they need in order to be independent, then they will flourish and fly. Planning for assistive technology. Can the children type it? Can they wear headphones and have their text read back to them? Exam access support. There are so many things that, you know, it just really does come back to, if you plan and prep and know your children, you can support them to succeed. Wendy, Stacey, have I missed anything up so far?
No, I don't think so.
No, am I right? Okay, I'll keep going. We all want a cup of tea. Are they different in distance learning? So that's probably the question that's on the tip of our tongue at the moment. Yes, but how different is totally up to your context, and you'll see when we look at Wendy's IEPs, we look at Stacey's, and we look at one of mine. They are so different. They're all examples of good practice, but they are all different for our context. So what does your setting look like? If you are not teaching at all, your IEPs are going to be very different to those that are teaching 6 lessons a day. What are you teaching? Full on English, math and science? You're doing the whole curriculum. What is the barrier for the child now? The barrier when we were in the classroom might look very different to the barrier now. Stacey was talking at the beginning of this about the child not sitting and looking at the screen. So actually that's what your setting looks like now. That's the challenge for the child now. Who is now working with your students? They might be with a teacher for the beginning of the lesson, but then they might be with an LSA afterwards. They might have moved a tutor into the house. We know that tutors are not allowed in terms of coming and going from the homes, but we do know that helpers and nannies and other people, big brothers, big sisters, are helping with the children. So can you give them a really difficult speech and language target when they have a 15-year-old brother working with them? So who's working with your students? What does online learning look like? And all of these have implication on your targets, and it goes right back to personalised, what that child needs today. Okay. What's the purpose of an IEP during distance learning? When I first thought of this question, I thought, well, there's no real purpose at all. But then when I thought about it a little bit deeper, I thought it does help to identify and agree the priorities for those children right now. They are probably very different to the priorities inside school. It provides everybody with a focus. It keeps all of us on track to make sure that these children don't fall backwards in this time. It gives a very clear record of progress. It demonstrates that we're still working really hard with these children and they are still being successful. It gives parents, teachers, and all of us a sense of a normality. I couldn't work out if there was an A in there or not. I think you can have it either way. So if I've spelt that wrong for someone, I do apologise. But normality is actually really important to all of us at the moment in our crazy world where we have no control over anything. Actually keeping our children on track and keeping them informed and having those same meetings with the same heads of inclusion is so important right now. We still have to do our job. Sorry, whether you're KHJ, Spear, ADEC, whoever you're with, we still have to do our job. And actually, this is an amazing opportunity for our own personal growth. Having to take a step back and think about what those children need now in this setting is actually pushing all of us outside our comfort zones. We're no longer able to rely on our traditional targets and progress. We have to think very differently. How are we managing targets during distance learning? So first of all, we've got to work out how we can all be successful. Please don't set a target for a 17-year-old to go out and learn to drive when it's not going to happen. We can't get into learning to drive cars. We're not going to let the children out of the homes. So make sure that you're setting targets where you can demonstrate success so that you can reinforce with positive reinforcement and make those children happy. Happy children learn. Go back to Maslow. I won't bore you with that. But we know that success starts with praise, or doesn't start with praise, but it's more likely to come with praise and positive. The parents need positivity as well. They're stuck home with their children all day. They want to know that they're doing a good job, and making the target successful for parents will mean that they feel they're doing a good job, which in turn will be good for the children. Make sure that you set a target that they can access. Again, don't set your kids a target that they're going to go out and drive when they don't have a car and they don't have insurance, or whatever your target is for your kids. Don't set a target to play with buttons if mum hasn't got any buttons in the house. What does your evidence look like? So again, don't set a target which can't be evidenced. So you want them to be videoable, you want them to be demonstrated on a Zoom or on a Teams or on a Meets. You want some way to get that information back to you so that you can say, yes, this kid's made progress. So set a meaningful target that can be evidenced. And then fourth is size important. I think I said a few slides ago, small is better than big. In this situation, you want to have achievable goals that can be celebrated regularly for the teacher, for the parents, for the child, and for us. When you're creating your IEP, whether you're in regular time or in distance learning, consider your format. Parents don't want 6-page IEPs at the present time. They might not have printing access. They might not want to use their ink, which is running out fast across all of our homes. Make sure that there is dialogue. Who is your TAC? TAC is an acronym for Team Around the Child. Who is your team around each child? Who does need to contribute to this IEP? I've got a couple of slides on that. What is the length of the target? What is the length of the IEP? And make sure that you share. Make sure that all of the teachers that are working with that child is aware of those targets. Sorry, ADEC and SPEAR. KHJ requirements at the moment, these all come out of the directives and the implementation. So I've taken the main ones. There are a few others which are smaller, but these are the main requirements. Some level 2 children and all level 3 children will have an IEP, especially those that are on the individualised service agreements. So within Debye, if we are charging parents additional money for support, we have to put into place a document which is an individualised service agreement, an ISA. So where parents are paying for the service, the children must have an IEP. IEPs must be specific to the student profile. New students should have an IEP implemented prior to starting. So if you don't know that child, if you've not met that child, if they've coming from overseas or they're coming from another school, but we haven't, especially in these times, we probably are not meeting the children, there must be a target in place, at least one, maybe two, and it could be familiarise yourself with the school surroundings. It could be introduce yourself to 3 children. It could be something really social and emotional and welfare connected. Make sure that you use your IEPs to inform planning of provision. So this is, do they need an LSA? Do they need wheelchair access? How are you going to provide for those children? Use your IEPs. All stakeholders must be involved. I've got a slide for that in a minute. Continuous and collaborative process. You don't print it, file it, and leave it till the end of the year. They are informed by assessment. Good practice number 9 there, the good practice is you baseline your child so the child can repeat 3 phonic sounds. To meet their target, they're going to be able to recite 10 phonic sounds by the end of the 6-week period. However, if they make 15 sounds, then they have exceeded their target. So you've got your baseline, you've got your met, and you've got your exceeded. And this can be put into data which can show that you're having amazing progress. So your baselines is your, or your met is your expected progress, your exceeded is your outstanding progress. Each student's IEP should be unique, and there must be regular meetings and that review cycle with your stakeholders. Those are the KHGA requirements for IEPs. The team is very clearly documented in directives on page 25. This says parent, student, teachers, the leader of provision, and other professionals. Other professionals would be your speech and language. It would be, I've just read the question. I'm not sure. Have you got the directives in front of you, Stacey? Can you look up? I was under the impression that IEP had to be placed within 6 weeks of arrival. So I've probably misread that. Are you able to just check that for me?
Let me have a look. I haven't got it in front of me.
Okay. If not, I'll come back to you because I have got a copy. I'll come back to you, Michaela, on that one, sorry. So the team around the child in the directives is stipulated as this. The child at the centre, you've got your parent, you've got your teacher network. So in primary, that might be one teacher plus a specialist in PE and a specialist in Arabic and Islamic. You might have a specialist in music or art. Your LSA network, the LSAs know so much about children, and they're really, really informative when it comes to where they think that the biggest barrier is right now. Your therapist network, your speech and language, your occupational therapy, your educational psychology, your doctors, your GPs, all of the therapy and the medical network can feed in, and then your family members. So you might want to focus on capital letters. The parent might want to focus on not having a tantrum as they arrive at school. So make sure that you listen to the family members, because their barriers need to be listened to and removed as well. When I worked with Amanda Buckley, when I was at King's, she's now currently at Horizon, she devised, and she probably devised it from reading and that, but I did feel I needed to credit it to her because it's not my idea. She created the person-centered review. And when she had her IEP meeting, where it was possible, she would bring as many people into the room as she could. She would schedule these rotationally weeks in advance to try and get the ed cycle, the speech and language into those meetings and schedule it around their timetables. She wasn't always possible. I think nowadays we're probably going to be doing a lot of these by Zoom, because then people are more available and not needing to travel. But she basically got 4 big pieces of paper and she put them around the room, and she included the child until the last step. So when we all went into the room, I remember doing this, it was the final IEP of term 3 for a year 6 child transitioning to secondary with me. And we went into the room and everybody was moving around the room. It was a very physical, non-threatening environment for the parents and the children. So we went in and we said, what do you like and admire about the child? And each person was working on a different sheet, so nobody was being watched. And the child was able to contribute as well. It was a year 6 child, so really mature and responsible. What do we like? And he was able to write on there what he liked about himself and what he admired about himself. But then he was also able to say what we liked about him. You know, was he kind? Was he really good at Lego? Was he really good at maths? And all the positives that came out about the child. And that was a really positive focus in the room. And then we moved on to what is important to the child and what is important to the parent and what is important to the school. And we found that those 3 things were very, very different in terms of the provision. What was working well? So we moved on to the what was working well and said, right, you know, this is going well. So actually 3/4 of that whole process was incredibly positive. And then the child would be sent back to class and we would then work as adults around him. What is not working as well as we would like? So from all of that, we've got the positive, the child walks away really happy. And then we talk about, right, what is important to mum and dad that we get right? What is important to the teacher? What is important to the development of the speech? And from that, we were all able to agree on a priority. And then we were able to put those priorities into IEPs, right? Actually, I really want my child toilet trained. That's the priority. But the school were like, oh, yes, but he needs to be able to hold a pen. And actually, what is the priority? Yeah, toilet training for this period was. So we put that into place. But that was a really nice, friendly, kind way of creating and giving everyone a voice into what was important for them. SMART targets are outlined on page 25. I'm not going to talk too much about this because Stacey and Wendy are going to cover this in their parts a little bit. But basically, SMART is specific. We know that it is not the child will tie his shoelaces. The first target might actually be a lot smaller of we're going to see if we can put a sock onto a bottle of Coke, because you need to take it back into small steps, specific and small and measurable. Then achievable. You're not going to give the target of driving a car to a 5-year-old. They're never going to get there. So, or they will do when they're older, but at the age of 5, they're not going to get there. So you make sure that it's achievable. If it is not possible, 100% not possible before you even start, then don't put it into place. Put in a smaller target so that they can start working towards that bigger target. Is it relevant? Meaning, is it purposeful in their lessons? Is it purposeful in their lives? I've seen some children do some really funny things, which is just, I can't think of one off the top of my head, which is just so not relevant to their lives at all. And time frame. Are they going to be able to do this within the given time frame that we're giving? Is it going to be within a week, or in 6 weeks, or in 6 months? Again, don't make a really difficult target achievable in the week, because it's not going to happen. All about success. Are you ready, Stacey?
I am. I was just replying to Michaela's question and Wendy was.
There you go. I stand corrected. Thank you very much, Michaela. So what is the answer? The answer is that must be within 6 weeks of joining the school, not before they join the school. There you go. Thank you very much. Yep. I like being corrected. It improves my practice.
Okay, can you move my slides on? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to focus on early years and primary, slightly different in how it looks. It's different in every school, it's different for every child. And I always say that it's really tricky with the small children because they change so quickly. And what they can do one day, they might not be able to do again the next day. And they just, from their very nature, will change. At our school, we always focus on the prime areas for our targets. So personal and social development, communication and language, and physical development. These are the prime areas, and it's so important to have these secure for these children, even if they can't do the maths or they're finding that difficult. If they can talk and they can work alongside other people, it makes it so much easier. Ensure they're relevant and they're real and they're reachable. As Louise has said, there is no point in giving a child a target that they're never going to get to. And if after 6 weeks you think this isn't working, then you need to change that, whether you have to change it completely or just tweak what you're going to do with it. Particularly for the early years, keep their activities linked to real life experience. And I think this has come across even more so at the moment with the remote learning. We obviously had our IEPs in place and ready, and then obviously we went into remote learning and we adapted them. And it was the discussions about how you can teach those targets in everyday situations. Like, it doesn't have to be just sat at a table. That's not what it should look like. And I'm going to kind of go on to that a little bit more on the next few slides, but just keep it linked to real life, keep it so that parents understand what you're trying to do, how they can support it, because then it's more successful because they feel that they can support you in that process. Louise, can you do my next one? Thank you. Okay, so one of the things we've talked about is getting information from the children. Obviously, when the children are older, they can sit and talk to you. They might be able to give you ideas. There's more ways of getting from them that information. And that's something we've worked on in our school for our younger students, is how does that look and how do we find out what they think? Even a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old does have very strong opinions, and we need to take that into account. So we do things like using a recording. So we just record and we sit and talk to the child, even if you're talking to them while they're playing, and we get them to record what they like, what they dislike. We do observations. So we will always observe a child that's referred to us, and we will do a track of what they like and what they avoid. Very often what they avoid is what they find difficult, and they're the things then that you can target. We have a lot of children who come in FS1 and avoid a lot of the messy play because they've got sensory needs and they haven't been exposed to it, and we need to work through that. And they will be the children that never put their hands in anything messy. And we work through that with them, and very often we've had cases where we've then had to sort of go through a sensory program with these children. Ask them to draw pictures of things that they enjoy, they're good at, do the same for difficult things. Talk to them and listen, and talk to the parents. They're a fountain of knowledge about these children, particularly in FS where they may not have been anywhere before. A lot of children here don't necessarily go to nursery. They're at home with mum or with a nanny, and it's really important to talk to those people to find out what it is that they struggle with. And sometimes when you speak to a parent, they'll say something that doesn't really mean a lot to them, but actually it gives you a big insight into what their difficulties are, and then you've got a starting point. Thank you, Louise. And you feel like I need to do a thumbs up. Okay, so these are just some of the documents that you might want to look at. What we try to do is, when I teach the teachers about doing IEPs, we always sort of look at documents we already have to give us an indication of what we need to do. So the characteristics of effective learning are in the development matters. On this slide, you can see the prime areas and then the specific areas. We always concentrate on the prime areas first. Obviously, health and safe care, making relationships, listening, the ability to speak when they need to. They're really key skills, and that's what we focus on before we even start looking at some of the other areas. Louise? I keep wanting to click the screen.
Sorry.
That's all right. And then also in that document, you will find different ideas, strategies. The middle column here is about what adults could do. So enabling that positive relationship. And that can give teachers who are writing targets, or our team as well, different ideas of what they can do to focus on different areas. And it gives you things for the environment as well. So what does your environment look like to support those needs of the student? That will all help everything come together. So when you're looking at a target, it's not just a standalone target that you're never going to cover within 6 weeks. It's something that's ongoing. Your environment enables the children to work on that target, and those positive relationships enable us to help with that child. Thank you, Louise. Okay, so when we start looking at the actual targets, these are the development matters targets that we use to base our IEP targets on. We don't use them word for word. We pick out where and what they need to work on. So think about where a child is now. Think about where they should be by age. Now, I've put that in apostrophes because a child, even if you say they're 50 months old, no child is going to be the same at 50 months. They're all different. And you need to think about where realistically these children should be. Obviously, if they're 30 to 50 months and they're still working down in the very young bracket, then that's more of a concern. If they're just working in the 22 to 36 months, we can put in steps that will make them get to 30 to 50 months. Some children will always work slightly below, some children will close that gap. And that again is dependent on that student and on that child. First question that parents always ask me is, when we do this IEP in 6 weeks' time, everything's going to be fine and we're going to be fixed. And it's still a quote that we have from parents. How are you going to fix my child? And that's something we are working on to try and make sure that it's a journey and we're looking at progress. So we use this document as a starting point, and we actually use this with the parents. So we will kind of say, this is where your child's working at, this is what we're expecting. Let's look at how we can get there. We would then pick a specific target out and make it a SMART target within our IEPs. And again, on this, it gives you more ideas, which just helps your staff, because you've got a team writing the IEPs, it helps your staff to have a starting point, because some staff find it very difficult to write targets or to think of different strategies. So it's just a helping document. Thank you, Louise.
So I've worked with children that are 7, 8, 9 years old that are still developmentally at the age of 22 or 36 months. And we have used the early years foundation stage targets for the older children, but we would never tell the parents that we're working at 36 months. So we would be nice and discreet about that. It's about what's right for the children. But just because, I mean, one of the important reasons that Stacey's included this in the presentation is that if you've got children that are working significantly below level, age appropriate level, it is acceptable to use these targets, but just be very discreet and polite about identifying that age in the development matters programme. Yeah, I think you do the same, right, Stacey? Yeah, we do. I mean, with our early years children, if I've got a 30 to 50 month child who's working at 22 to 36 months, I might actually say to the parent, like, this is a very small gap, this is what we're going to work on. It depends on your parents. Some of our parents, you can have that conversation. Some of them, we need to be a little bit more discreet, and that's knowing your parents and knowing the situation that they're in. What we also done in the past is taken these targets out
and taken the ages off. So all we've done is basically created a ladder of steps that the children need to work through. So there is no age linked to that. We do that very often for our year 1 students. A lot of our year 1 children are still working within the FS, which is fine, and that's a crossover period. But for those children who it takes a little bit longer, maybe we're heading into year 2 and we're still working within these EYFS targets, you can then take out the age bands. So you're still making the progress, it's still developmental, but you're not putting an age to it. So that's really important just to think about for your parents.
For the children with autism, I think one of the early years goals is to be able to hold a reciprocal conversation. And for some children, if they're non-verbal, that it's not ever going to happen. So then you would just take that off the table and not, again, pound that into the child every time we're doing a review. Every time, parents don't need to hear it more than a couple of times. So if it is completely off the table, then take it off the documentation so that you're not showing your negatives, you're showing your progress and what they are being successful at. I think grief is a major part of it, having a child with needs and barriers, and so whatever we can do to protect the parents against the grief being given back to them every time we have a meeting and reinforce our positive relationship, definitely worth doing. Okay, next one.
Thank you. Okay, so this is just an example, very simple. On the next few slides, I'll show you a few more of an IEP in our school. We have a target. Now on this one, my poor son has been dragged into this. I've used his name. So it remains, he does need to work on these. Perhaps we should do him an IEP. So these are the IEPs we have. They outline the target, they outline the strategies and provision and the success criteria. We then as a school have developing, progressing and secure. It moves up. So secure means they have met it. That's something moving forward that we are going to revise so that we will have working towards, obviously not in these words, we will phrase it, but working towards, met and then exceeding, because that links into the new documentation. But at the moment, we haven't changed that because our parents are very used to these documents and we didn't want to cause too much stress by changing different things. So for the time being, we have left it as it is. So as you will see on here, we actually do outline PSED, CLL and PD. So we literally break it down. We keep it linked to the development matters. We give ideas of what to do, and then we look at how many times that child has to do that. And the problem in early years is it isn't just to sit down and do. It could happen at any time. You could have a day where they do it 3 times successfully. You could have a day where they think, I don't want to play with anybody. I just want to be on my own. Leave me alone. So you have to do it over a period of time. And it's just being very specific about why are you doing these? I mean, these targets here are taking turns. Really important skill for young children to learn to avoid a lot of the social stresses when they can't wait, they can't understand, and it's explaining that to them. Listening to and answering a simple where question links into real life. Where are your shoes? Where are your socks? Where is your drinks bottle? It's different things, and parents, when they start to realise that, think actually that's a really important skill. And then when you go to the shops, you could say to them, where are the biscuits? Where are the apples? And link it into real life, and parents can do that very easily. Marks on a piece of paper, that follows on from a lot of hand strength exercises, and then getting them, it's the pre-learning to writing, so getting them to actually copy different materials, copy different shapes, straight lines, circles, triangles, because letters are all made up of different shapes. So it's just sort of looking at what you want them to do and how many times you want them to do that. Lots of the time they will exceed that if it's a reachable target. Thank you, Louise.
Sorry, I was responding to a chat. There we go. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, the same thing in primary. So we use learning ladders as our assessment scheme in primary and for planning. We can use it in the same way that basically we use the development matters. So we have different rungs. The children work their way up. There will be rungs that they can't get. It's never going to happen, or we're going to have to come back to it once they've got other skills secure. And it's the same thing. Teachers can use this as a starting point and then make it more specific and more relevant and more measurable. It just gives people a little bit of a helping hand when they're starting to look at targets. What we've actually done on learning ladders as well is something we're exploring at the moment, is putting in steps below that ladder. So for instance, in year 2, they have a year 2 ladder. A lot of our children would find that very difficult. And yes, we could go into the year 1 targets, but we actually need something more than that, which is smaller steps. And we've started inputting some of our own smaller steps so that children can be making progress. Again, they are used for the SMART targets, and we just adapt them. And I think the next one is, so this is a primary IEP. It's very similar. It's the same sort of layout. This is linked to remote learning. So this is one that we've done for remote learning for one of our LSA children who does anything she can to avoid any remote learning. Loves it when she's actually on the screen and when she's talking to everybody, but the behind the scenes is a little bit more chaotic. Parents reported that they needed to make her a little bit more independent and to also remember the social skills. Students who struggle with social skills in school have found that really difficult during remote learning, because it's actually harder to be social on screen and during group lessons. So that's something we've been really working on with this child. And we've just broken it right down so that the parents can have a look and can literally work through and see very simply what they have to do. And we always do a bit of an overall target and then break that down smaller.
And I think what's missing on here is you haven't got all the details about the child and about their barriers.
No, that comes in the next.
Because you've just cut out the targets for us to be focused.
I was doing it so people could see.
I just didn't want anyone to think this was your whole IEP.
No, this is not a whole IEP. It's a whole document.
Good. This is on the wrong screen. There we go.
Okay, so during remote learning, we've changed slightly how we are delivering and recording our information. This is a continuous learning log that our inclusion teachers, our inclusion TAs and our learning support assistants all complete. So every time there is a session, they record the target that they're going to work on, whether the work's been submitted, if the child turned up for the lesson and what the outcome was. Because we want to keep it ongoing and because the situation is changing all the time, we have been more adaptive in our targets. So they are changing more regularly. And this just allows us to keep a very clear track of what is happening. And it gives us good evidence as well moving into next year. Some of our students who have been on Wave 2 IEPs for quite a while, and we are arguing that we need to sort of move them up. They perhaps need more support. They need to move into Wave 3. These documents have actually really supported what we have been saying. And we will have to have those conversations with parents, and that will be happening. But actually parents will agree with us, I think, because of all the evidence that we have collected and what they've seen as well. So these documents aren't shared with parents, but we do discuss them and we discuss evidence that we have found as well. So this is during our online learning. And next year in our school, what I want to do is develop something like this that's ongoing for our in-school IEPs, because as we say, we still get the ones that are put in a folder and aren't looked at, aren't annotated until we get to the end and then scribble all over them. So we're trying to think of a more digital way to make that manageable as well. And something like this will probably be what we move towards. Thank you, Louise. Okay, so what does learning look like at home? Again, looking at the online learning, this is just something I was talking to a parent the other day who said, but how am I supposed to teach counting when they don't want to sit down and count? And I was like, do it in different ways. So these are just some examples, like setting the table for dinner, a job that all children can do, like to do, but you can incorporate so much into that. And it's counting, how many do you need, positional language, where are you going to put it on the table, what's it next to, what's it above, there's different shapes, the social skills, so working with another peer, like their friends or their brothers and sisters, set the table, answering questions, and it's their fine motor skills as well. Even in that small task of just setting the table, there's so much, and you can incorporate different things into that. And then for the older children, you can look at, they could design a table setting, they could write a menu, they could do place cards, they could make decorations, they can go and cook, they can help. It's so many different life skills that you can do. And actually, when you look at it, they've learned so much through that. And the same goes for making a cake. I mean, these are just things that I've done at home with my own children. And it's the measuring, it's the timing, it's looking at the different physical skills they have to use as well. And again, for the older children, you can leave them to it. They can order the ingredients, they can do a menu, they can do a budget. And there's so much that they will get out of that as well. Thank you, Louise. And then I just added this in here because obviously we're going to record this and send this out as a presentation as well. These are what our IEPs look like at the beginning. So this bottom picture here is an overview of the strengths and the challenges, a photo of the child, any external agency involvement, if they have any support, what support they have, if the counsellor's involved. And then this year we added in a data sheet. So all of our data from our learning ladders, from our CATs, from our PAS, everything is in one place because the teachers then can see the different scores that children got. And we try and get across to them that these scores are very often perhaps not the best reflection of a child, but it's really important to take them into account, particularly how children learn as well. So it's helped just to get people to think through what the data we have on the children.
Do your IEPs change between early years and primary?
They all have the same sort of outline. So this front sheet remains the same, but the data would change. So we'd have the development matters data on there, and we take out the PAS because they don't do it. So it's just a variation of that between early years and primary. But any data we have is put within that document.
And you've been doing this quite a few years. How often do you change your format?
This is new last year, so probably every year. And I'm already thinking, I've just actually, while we were sitting, made a note about what we can change next year. So every time I go to a training or we talk to somebody or you see an IEP from students who are moving into your school, there's always different ideas. And it's about what works and what isn't going to be beneficial. And I think for teachers, it's making it manageable. We now have one rolling document for the whole year. So all of our IEPs are within one document. They're all on Google Drive, so they're not printed. We've gone away from printed copies because it was just paper. We have them all on Google Drive and everybody can amend them. So it works better in the fact it's more manageable, but now the next step for us is looking at how we can track that more and more closely. And that's what we're going to be doing next year for our focus.
I think it's really important with somebody who's just starting out or just becoming a Senko, who's new to the role, is to understand that we've got here from 10, 20, 30 years of experience. You're not that old, Stacey. That's why I started with 10 for you and 20 for Wendy and 30 for me. It's all about developing process, and we learn changing vocabulary every year. So I think somebody starting out, it's important to know yours might not include a data sheet yet because you've actually got enough to do creating all the IEPs. The data sheet might be something that you have brought in, year 2 or year 3 or year 4, and I think, and it also might come and then it might go if it becomes too heavy and you don't have the staff capacity and you don't have, very few of us have an administrator, and actually if your workload is such that you need to prioritise on, getting the teachers involved, it might not be something you can focus on this year. But if you want to focus on it, put it in your action plan and then revisit it when you've got the time and the space to do that. I think at the moment, I know that I'm looking at year 6 transition and I'm looking at children going off to university, and some of the things that I would normally be doing at this time of year, I think especially secondary, we'd be looking at access arrangements for year 10, and all of that has got to be put to one side at the moment. So other things are able to be achieved which wouldn't have normally been achieved at this time of the year. So if you're new to this, start with what you can manage, get something. If you want to improve it, put in your action plan and attack it later. Thanks, Stacey.
That's okay.
All right, thanks so much. Awesome. Now we're going to move over to Wendy. Wendy is over at Wellington International School. I think she's going to kill me. I think she's been there 10 years. incredible practice, incredibly diverse school, incredibly inclusive, and has had many successes with children. So I'm very happy to hand over to her now with examples of good practice for secondary and sixth form. It is worth noting that Wendy does actually do through school now, so she is early years right through to sixth form, but I've asked her to focus on secondary at the moment. Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you. And actually, it's really interesting listening to Stacey, because there are so many similarities between the primary and the secondary practice, but then again, so many differences. And the biggest thing that I have found now I'm through school is that in my experience, the IEPs are much more straightforward for my primary students, because I have a teacher and I have an LSA and I have a head of year and I have parents, and they can all work on this document and they can review it all the time, and it's a joy. And our IEPs lower down the school are, I think, excellent. I've always found it much harder with secondary, always, because you have a whole group of people. So, you know, this child might go to 10 different teachers, some of them once a week. And all of those teachers have to be aware of this IEP. It has to be useful. It has to have impact. And that's what I've struggled with. I've struggled always. I'm always changing my IEPs. I'm always trying to develop them and make them better, because I struggle with the fact I don't want it to be a waste of anybody's time. Because in secondary, we write the IEPs. The teacher doesn't do it. We do it, and then we have to spread that out to the teacher. So our IEPs in secondary tend to be very focused on underlying soft skills, social, emotional, behaviour, life skills. The academic targets are set by the teacher in the lesson. So we don't touch the academic targets. We look at those underlying skills that are going to be, if we improve them and develop them, they're going to enable the progress academically elsewhere in the curriculum. So that's the way we kind of work. And one of the first things that I think that we need to think about is how you measure those soft skills, because obviously one of the biggest things for IEPs is measurable. So, you know, when we're talking about, I want them to improve their social skills, well, how are you going to know? How are you going to know that they have? And that's something I've worked really hard on, trying to look at something that we can measure these skills by. So this sort of rubric is my measurement, if you like, and we use this to write the IEP targets and to track the IEP targets and to measure progress. So the top 4 lines are types of measurement. So you've got, or 5 lines, aren't they? So you've got the developing, approaching, mastering, if you want to use those. We've got numbers 1 to 10, percentage, frequency, or number of times. So you can use a variety of different numbers, if you like, to collect your data, depending on the skill. And then the rest of it is kind of the skills that we might want to improve. So it kind of is supposed to be all encompassing. So if we wanted to improve group work skills or independence, they would fit in there somewhere. So support levels, for example, that's something to do with independence. Task completion might be linked to attitude to learning. So these should link. Now, again, this is something that this didn't look like this when I started, and it does change, and it will continue to change. But we find it really useful that LSAs use it to track in lessons. You know, they've got a spreadsheet. If they know that the target's about independence, they might give a number for their support levels, give a number for their prompting, and we can track it with the numbers that the LSAs use. The members of staff are always also informed about this, and they look at it to make sure that they are working towards that as well. So that's where this has come from. I'm trying to be quite succinct because I'm really aware of time. And if everybody's primary, then everybody's going to start going off to have their cup of tea now anyway, aren't they?
We do come back to primary in a bit.
Okay, so next slide, please.
Thank you.
Okay, so using that, we look at our targets, and all I've done is given a couple of examples, very similar to Stacey's really. So it's just looking at what it is you want them to achieve, and then how are you going to set a target around that that's measurable relevant and timescaled. For us, the timescale is the IEP dates. And for us in secondary, it tends to be a longer time than it probably would in primary. Primary review their IEPs and their targets a lot more than we do because they're with the students every day. Whereas I'm not going to ask people to review them when they've taught them 3 times a week or once a week. So it takes longer maybe to embed. We still look at them, but they're reviewed less frequently than they are in primary. So this would be an example of the group work skills using the rubric that I spoke about. So if I want a child, if the focus for that child is group work skills, this might be a target on the IEP. To be able to communicate at least one idea, which is very specific, verbally within a group with less than level 4. So you go back to the rubric and think, where's level 4? At least once during each group work activity. Then our LSAs would be tracking this on their tracking sheet that they fill in every day. Okay, thank you, Louise. Again, another example of an IEP target. This is about looking at participation, joining in, because some of our students obviously are very quiet and we want to give them that skill of being able to self-advocate and talk up. This one is for a student that's possibly further down the line in their social skills and their participation than the first target, because this is very specific around questioning and asking a question about the lesson or topic. And their prompting would be at level 7 or above. So that would be quite low. They wouldn't need much prompting because obviously lots of prompting is a level 0 and less prompting is a level 10 because we work upwards like that. So that's kind of just some examples to, and again, like I say, they're very similar to Stacey's. The kind of targets that you set, I think, are actually quite similar through school, because I can have children that are working at a level, a year 2 level. So the targets are pretty much similar, but the way we look at our IEPs might be slightly different. If you want to move on, Louise, thank you.
That was the third one. Did you that, or was
that? Oh, there's a third one. Again, it's the same thing. This one is more about independence. And for us, we're really, even before this remote learning time, we were trying to push independence skills as much as possible. So looking at a reading support tool, I have to say this time has allowed us to whiz through some of our targets that were around assistive technology. So that's been really useful because students have been forced into using it. It's been brilliant. But again, it's just an example, and I've color coded it so you can see the measurable, the specific, and obviously the achievable and relevant comes from the first page of the IEP, where we're looking at what their strengths and their challenges are.
Yeah, I like it. It helps to make sense of it, doesn't it?
I love a colour coded. So this is the front cover of our IEPs in secondary at the moment, and these have been adapted to meet the requirements of the KHDA. So you'll just see it's got all the information that you need on there, strengths and challenges. We always put a picture on there, and we always do the student voice. That's all right. I'll try and be quicker.
No, that wasn't what I was doing. I
know I do. So we always put the student voice on there because for us, that's the most powerful thing. I can tell teachers they don't like it if you do this. They don't take any notice of me because I do nothing but nag. But when they see the student has said, I find it difficult to listen to you if you talk for a long time, then actually that's a much more powerful voice. So we make sure the student has their voice on there. So that's the front cover of the IEP. Thank you, Louise. And then we have our strategies. So we have in-class non-negotiables. We try to have about 3, no more than 3, and we have those in English and Arabic. And those are the ones that must happen no matter what. And it's very different for every child. It might be their seating arrangements. It might be they have to have their laptop out whether they like it or not. Those are the ones non-negotiable. If I walked into a classroom, that is happening for that child no matter where I go. And then we also put other additional classroom strategies that could help the child depending on the topic, the time of day you have the child. You know, they're much more variable, but you would expect the teacher to use them to inform their planning. And then if you carry on, we have our target page, which again is very similar to Stacey's. So we have the targets, the strategies that we would pull out, what the success looks like, and then our review sort of halfway through, we write a little review of how they're getting on and whether we need to adapt that or not. So that's kind of what our IEPs look like in secondary, apart from the fact that last year I changed them a little bit, because one of my big concerns is that teachers don't take the responsibility for the students in this the students in their class. So I would write an IEP, I do all of this work, I give it to a teacher, and they wouldn't look at it. And we all know that that happens. And I don't think that's very useful. I think the teachers need to be much more proactive in what they're doing for our level 3 children and our children who need an IEP. So
I've just lost your voice. Oh, you're back. I think you're back.
Oh, okay.
Hello? There you go.
I'm here. So what we
need to be much more proactive is where I lost you.
Yeah, so well, that's basically where I was. So they need to be much more proactive in setting the targets and in reviewing the targets. So we changed it last year. We've only done it for one round, and it's had varying success, but I still think it's a brilliant idea, and I'm pushing it again in September. So we changed it. The targets have gone. So if you go back, the targets have gone on this sheet now. So we have our front page and we have this strategy page. And then if you see along the bottom, this is a Google Excel sheet, there are tabs for each subject. And instead of a target on our page here, we have a focus. So the focus, we decide on the focus. It might be independent skills. It might be group work skills. It might be sitting in their seat for 20 minutes before they, whatever it is we think that needs to be the focus for that child, we set that. Then each teacher for each subject sets their targets that are written around the needs of their particular subject, because they know what they're going to be teaching. They know what happens in their classroom. It's very different in English than it is in PE. So actually having the same target doesn't always work for them. They need to make those targets work for their own subjects. So if it's a group work skill, then English might talk about, when they're doing their own group work, what do they want that, how do they want that child to develop within the group work within English? That will look slightly different in PE, because they might have a different focus. It might be that they have to get into a group quickly rather than expecting somebody to choose them, or whatever it is. So that the teachers set the targets, we quality control them. It hasn't been easy. Teachers find it more difficult to write smart targets than we do, and we all find it quite difficult. We did lots of training, we did lots of one-to-one, let's talk through your targets, but the impact was 100 times better, because those teachers, first of all, had to think about those students. They had to think about those students and the difficulties they had for those students, and they had to think about how they were going to improve that in their lesson. I thought it was brilliant, but then it was my idea. So then they had to review it, and then we will continue to work on that. So that's a work in progress, an idea, but that's how we're moving towards our IEPs. And then very lastly, for our remote learning, we've just done a front page, and we've looked at a couple of targets. We've tried to keep it so simple. For me, simple is much more effective. Less writing is better for me. So we've looked at targets that either they need in order to access the remote learning, or targets that parents are worried might drift away. So you will find fine and gross motor skills targets on a lot of our remote learning IEPs. And then also if they've got areas of technology that they need, then they tend to be targets as well. So there tends to be only a couple of targets, strategies, and the success criteria tends to be evidence-based, along with, like, we get videos, we get pictures, with the typing, they'll type something every week so we can track progress. But this is very simple. I don't want to confuse parents, make parents feel like they've got lots of work to do. These were simple. They were worked through and talked through with parents, and they just sit on top of our normal IEPs.
I like that strategy. Practice throwing and catching a ball or beanbag or other suitable object. See, you're throwing lots of interesting things around the house.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Well, you don't know what people have got at home, do you?
No. So, Jumeirah College. Sorry, Wendy. What were you saying?
No, I just said thank you. I'm turning off now.
Don't leave. We might have questions at the end. So within Jumeirah College, I've done something very similar to Wendy on the distance learning only. So this is not a regular IEP. So within distance learning, we've got that date and we're doing activities. So every time something comes up that we're working on, and if we're teaching them something, a different skill, so this is not academic, similar to Wendy, if it's a different skill that we're teaching them, and if they're mastering it, they're getting the green tick. And what we then found is we actually did quite a lot of targets across. So this is year 9 for student A. At the beginning, we were working on so many different things. There was, you know, managing to access Google Hangouts, managing to access Google Classrooms. And so we were able to actually put in a lot of progress. And when you look at it like this, they have achieved so much in this distance learning that they wouldn't have been able to achieve. But what I do is I just literally say this. So student A has been given 19 different things he needs to learn. He's been successful with 10. He's still working on 9. But actually, that shows quite a lot of success for our students. And then you can manipulate that data. And I do this for the other IEPs through the year as well. But you can change that data into percentages. So we set 113 targets across year 9 this term. 80 have been achieved, which is 71%. And 33 are still unachieved, but we've still got 5 weeks to go. So it's 29% unachieved. But actually, they are quite good numbers when you're then evidencing progress. And how do you know you're doing a good job? How do you know the children are making progress? This is how I manipulate those targets into data when it comes to inspection time. So the key takeaways from the session today, we are really at the end. Final thoughts, IEPs are different, but they are the same. Targets are important, but remember that well-being. This is an opportunity. Try not to waste the time, but make it relevant to this time and use this time to learn about your students. We're going to put the PowerPoint and the video up on Microsoft Teams so you can watch it if you've had to leave, or if you've had to leave, you won't hear me saying that. But on the end, I have just put these very quick slides. The pre-referral intervention manual is about £150, so about 600-700 dirhams. It's a lot of money, but it is really good. So read up about this in case you need it. When it comes to English curriculum skills for EYFS, in September they're bringing out the engagement model, which replaces the scales, and you can download this for free from the UK. And this gives some really good, where Stacey, when Stacey first started about being EYFS, she showed you all of those different targets and levels, and this document has got loads of information in. There's also the early years foundation stage profile that Stacey talked about, so there's the link for that there. How to use the early years development journal. There is a journal which you can use to evidence development. And lastly, but not least, I think you must celebrate these children. And these parents, they are all having a difficult time. So this is how we are celebrating our students across the board, but it's very important with children of determination. Certificates of appreciation are sent home. We send home emails to parents, telling the parents that they are doing a good job in a really non-patronising way. Get them on the website. I'm anxious about, we according to the directives, we have to put our children on the website, but I do believe in protecting them. Think carefully about putting names to them. You might want to put first name. Don't advertise their vulnerability. If you've got a child with a cognitive delay in a wheelchair, by putting them on the website, you are telling people their name, you're telling them where they go to school, and you're telling them that actually they're very vulnerable, which leaves them very open to lots of horrible, scary things we don't want to talk about. But be very aware that you're advertising vulnerability. And remember that children are not able to give informed consent. And this particularly hurts home because when my child was about 15, 16, he said to me in tears and floods one day, will you stop talking about what I'm not good at? And will you stop? He's all right with it now. He's 22, he's an adult. He lets me talk about him now. And sometimes he comes in some of my videos. But when he was going through the teenage years, he would see magazine articles where I wrote about him. He would see pictures where I had shown what he can't do. I had a picture in one of my training programs about how he was unable to write, and how it was when he was 5 and how it was when he was 15, and it was exactly the same. And that actually caused quite a lot of pain for him. And I do regret that. And so I'm particularly careful about that with children. You can share videos, but with permission, again, informed consent. Parent forums, we celebrate through scheduled calls. So on a Thursday, I've got 2 parents who are highly anxious. So I make sure that my last 2 calls on a Thursday are to them and the content is only positive. If I've got anything negative, that is on a Sunday so that we've got the week to work through, so that the weekends are not stressful. If there is anything negative about work, we do that on a weekday, not on a Thursday. Positive only on a Thursday. Host points and other heads of years, emails home, all the usual mechanisms for celebration, and public appreciation without humiliation. So you don't want to go publicly in front of the school and say, yay, this 10-year-old just managed to toilet himself. That is so humiliating. You can just say, we set a goal and he met the goal. And that's all that the public need to know. You can celebrate the goals without being specific about what the goal was. And I think that is all. If you've got any questions and you've stayed the duration of this, I am incredibly impressed. So, Stacey, have you been monitoring the chat? Wendy, is there any questions on there that we need to address?
Most of them
as we go through. So one major move about the IEPs. Yes, Wendy?
Sorry. So somebody was asking about whether the LSAs have laptops or iPads. I have to say that ours do, because just before we weren't allowed in school, I ran around with my technician getting the exam laptops, you know, the laptop trolleys, everything, and just sent them out because I was so worried that they wouldn't be able to do anything. And thank goodness that we did. But that's a real issue if they haven't got them, I think.
Yeah. Mine do in this setting, because we did exactly the same. We gave them the exam laptops to work from home, but in normal term times, mine don't carry a device around with them. But that I am new to JC, and that is something that's in the budget for Touchwood next year, hopefully. But I think that was probably it, which either means we've bored them all to tears, or we've answered all the questions. Either way round, that's a win-win, right?
Just one very last thing I wanted to share. When you were talking about celebration, just one thing that I've only started to do in remote learning, and it's gone down such a treat that I'm going to continue. So every Thursday I do a screencaster by a video myself doing a message to the parents. Awesome. And it's just full of, oh, well done to so-and-so because they've done this week. And I've got a little chart, so I make sure I mention everybody eventually. And then there's a star of the week and they get a certificate, and there's bits and pieces for the parents. They absolutely love it. It only takes me 5 or 10 minutes. Video myself, which I love to do, and it's really, really popular. So it might be something other people would like to do.
Do you send that out to the whole school or just your inclusion kids?
No, goodness me, no. I send it to all Wave 3 parents and some selected Wave 2 parents. So there's a little group, and I send it to them every week. And I've had nothing but positive feedback. They absolutely love it. And the students love it. The students have started listening out for their name.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, so that's a nice little tip.
There's a question just come in from Nikki about learning ladders. Do you use them in secondary? What's the best way to prioritise IEP? Nicola, do you want to unmic? I can't even speak, I'm so tired. Do you want to unmute yourself and join in the conversation? We're very happy to hear from people.
Oh, thank you so much. You guys must be exhausted. It's like 1 hour and 40 minutes in, and I've only come into the end of the meeting. I was in another meeting.
We talk too much.
Well, I can't wait to look back and actually hear the beginning of the meeting, because obviously I missed some bits. But for me, I find it's very difficult to prioritise targets, IEP targets for secondary school students, because they've got so many fundamental gaps, you know. And I find with IEP targets that people choose a target, but it might not be the best one, like a prioritised target for closing gaps and getting those kids closer to where they need to be. Is there a list of, is there a learning ladder especially for kids in secondary, or any ideas?
I don't use learning ladders, but the way I look at IEP targets again is about I'm trying, what we try to focus on is the skills that they need in order to enable them to go into a lesson and work so that they can close their gap. So if they can't sit in a chair for longer than 5 minutes, that's going to affect their learning within a classroom. So that might be something we work on. Or if a child, independent skills in secondary is something that almost probably comes onto every IEP, because that's not just about what they're doing in school, because it's not just about academic, is it? It's about developing these young people so that they can be successful when they leave school. So we have to put those skills in as well. So they're so individual, you know, each child does need something different in order to help them close the gaps. But that's the way my IEP targets don't necessarily close the gaps, but they give them the skills needed to help them close the gaps in those areas of the curriculum. Does that make sense?
It does. I absolutely agree with you, and it's really helped actually for me to consider that area of it. But I'm thinking about, you know, say for example, I'm asking my the English teacher to set a target for them to support their English, perhaps writing skills. Would there be you know, a good document to kind of go to? I mean, I'm considering creating my own learning ladder for secondary in conjunction with the English teacher.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get involved so much in like English specific targets. So we set the general targets, and then the English teacher would write their targets around what they know about the child and what they need to do. So those sort of academic targets around being able to write something wouldn't necessarily come into our IEP. That's because that's much more subject specific. So if we're saying that a student needs to develop their independent skills, and one way is, you know, they need to learn how to fill in a form or write a letter, then that might come into the English one. But we tend to move away. We've tended to move away from those sort of specific academic targets, and it's more about the skills that are going to enable them in those areas.
Okay, that's
right.
Great.
So I think for me, I'm definitely concentrating on participation. So if it's ADHD, it might be reducing the amount of times they shout out in the lesson. Independence, how to withdraw the reliance on additional adult support. How to advocate for themselves is also a big one that I use quite a lot. They need to be referring back to their learner profile with the teachers, making sure that they get what they need according to the profile and the IEPs, and self-advocacy as well. But I'm the same as Wendy. I very rarely touch academics because each topic in each subject requires different skills, and I don't think we'd be able to keep up with that. And I'm not tracking that in secondary. The teachers are tracking that. If I want to know about the science skills or the practical skills, the teacher has that, not us. Does that help at all?
Yeah, it does. Thanks. I just wanted to support those teachers with some, because some of them, you know, they're secondary and they don't have the subject knowledge about supporting those gaps. So
yeah,
I know.
I think if one of them came back to me and wanted something specific, then I'd be more than happy to advise on it. I'm just not sure that I would put that in, and I don't know. I might do. If that, and I think if it's relevant across the curriculum, because like Wendy said, what's relevant in English is not always going to be relevant in PE. So you don't want to give your precious targets across one subject when it's not necessary. English would be different because the academics across the curriculum. But yeah, interesting.
But I also think, I don't know what setting you're in, but working in a through school has been the most useful thing in terms of subject support, because we can send the English teacher down to an English teacher or a literacy teacher in year 2 if that's where the child's working, and they can get some ideas of possible targets for that child that way. And then those targets are put into the lesson, into the learning objectives need to be sorted out for those students in that particular lesson.
I think you've got something specific, a specific question, Nikki, about a specific child at a specific level in a specific subject, come back to us. I mean, Wendy's very open, Stacey, myself, you know, we've got people like Lubna and Siobhan in the network. There are so many people that we can bounce ideas off. So do come back. That's what the Teams is for. We're all now much more connected with that. So come back and ask the question about something specific, and we'll see what we can dig out, because between us, we've probably got every book covered.
I've just seen Natasha's question in there. In secondary pull-out sessions, do you work on curriculum gaps or IEP targets? Well, our pull-out sessions are focused on something. So if they have pull-out, it might be for literacy, it might be for numeracy. But we work on the IEP targets as well, because they're the underlying skills. So the IEP targets would work anywhere, but the pull-out sessions are different from the IEP targets. They're focused sessions to close gaps, really. Does that make sense?
Natasha, did you want to unmute yourself and add to that at all?
Yeah, I was just, because our groups are quite big, unfortunately, our pull-out groups, like in secondary, they're up to 10 in one group. And so sometimes it is really hard to kind of support the IEP progress within. And also, like, the maths gets very hard in NYP as you go up. And so we're lucky to have a maths teacher who's actually in our learning support team. But if she was to leave, I don't know who else on my team would be able to support the maths curriculum in the pull-out sessions. So it's just been something we've been kind of toying around with these pull-out sessions, and we found it quite difficult, actually.
Yeah, we agree. And I think it's all part of the mapping of the provision for the future. What areas do we need to be recruiting in? I mean, it's just vast, isn't it, when you start pulling apart individual children's needs at secondary when they've got so many subjects.
It's also worth trying to pull in the maths specialist. I mean, there's no reason why the maths department can't deliver interventions if they've got any spare time. Sometimes you do find a little light timetable somewhere, and there's no reason why you can't utilise the staff in school. It doesn't have to be inclusion staff, in my opinion.
Does that answer it, Natasha?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. It's just good to know that maybe other people are kind of struggling with that a little bit as well, and it's not just our school.
Oh, no, I think we all have the same struggles. Time, energy, yeah, finance. No problem, Natasha. Nice to see you here. I noticed that Emily's joined us. Emily, would you like to unmute and join us and say hi?
Hi, thank you, Louise. Yes, no, nothing to add really, apart from apologies for jumping in late. And thank you so much to Louise, Wendy and Stacey for pulling this together and leading it. I can see how helpful everyone's found it. The only thing I probably wanted to add just from a GEMS corporate perspective is that I kind of jumped in towards the end when people were talking about IEP progress tracking. And it was just to say and make people aware that this might not be a world-shattering solution, but the intention going forward on GEMS Phoenix platform is that as part of the inclusion module on the Phoenix platform, there will be an IEP kind of target tracking functionality. So some members of the existing GEMS Inclusion Network kindly volunteered to be part of an ICT steering group who are working with me, working on developing that module. So hopefully in time, you will all have access to, something on the software that can support you with tracking IEP targets, but also allowing you to run reports from that system. So you could pull out and look at, I want to look at grade 2 kind of target progress for students with primary area need of speech and language, and it should hopefully enable you to run reports as well. So it's just to make people aware that that is in the pipeline. Watch this space, and we'll probably need your patience on kind of getting it up and running in perfect functionality, but just wanted to add that in.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us as long as you did. That's great. So I'm going to put together a questionnaire for, so we're wrapping up now. We're going to put the slides on Teams. We'll put a copy of the video on Teams for sharing within the GEMS network. And I'm going to send out a Google form questionnaire so that we can get some feedback on what went well, even better if, and what future opportunities we might need to look at. And Emily has already put together a steering group for training, and so that will help to inform future training and future sessions. On behalf of Emily and Wendy and Stacey and myself, would like to thank you very much for joining us. We had up to about 36 at one stage. People have had to leave because it's getting late. So we thank you very much for your time. If you've got any questions, post them on the Teams. If you want examples or anything at all, the whole beautiful thing about the GEMS network is we're all here to help each other. You're not alone. I do apologise to the Indian curriculum and the Sharjah and the Abu Dhabi if we haven't covered enough of your area. But again, it's good practice. If you've got any questions, let us know. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stacey. Thank you, Wendy. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.